I get the opposite. I stop talking.
Okay, let's begin. Welcome everyone to the Art Jewelry Forum Hangout, where we get to visit the wonderful region of North America. Much of these hangouts has been visiting countries where the jewelry scenes are emerging, very exciting growth in global jewelry. And now we have the opportunity to look at where the scene is a little more established in North America, and we get a sense also of, what is happening in terms of some of the new issues, but also regions in this vast subcontinent that maybe not as well covered as in previous times. So we're blessed to have 5 very fresh and vibrant voices in the contemporary jewelry scene from Toronto, Maine, Austin, Texas, Seattle, and Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. So we're covering quite a range of territory. Let's first hear from you, Melanie.
I'm Melanie Egan. I'm the Director of Craft and Design at Harbourfront Centre, which is an artist in residency for postgraduates. I'm located in Toronto, which is kind of central east Canada. And one of the studios that we have at Harbourfront Centre is a jewelry studio. And I was a jeweler many, many years ago, so it does hold a special place in my heart. And I'm looking forward to the discussion that will unfold this evening.
Thanks. You've been a great ambassador for Canada, keeping us well informed of what's happening. Thanks. And now we go to our US ambassador, Sarah Rachel Brown. Good evening.
Good evening.
Where are you?
Well, technically I'm in Maine right now, but I live full-time in Philadelphia on the East Coast. Contemporary jeweler. I just relocated to Philadelphia, actually. Spent a couple years living at craft schools in the area. And I work my studio practice full-time right now.
Good. Great to have you on board. And now we go to the other border down south to Texas, to Laritza. Buenas tardes. Welcome. Where are you now exactly?
Hi, I'm Laritza Garcia. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you guys. And right now I'm in my home studio in Austin, Texas. I'm originally from South Texas, though, right on the border with McAllen and Reynosa. And right now I teach full-time at Texas State University, and I split my time between school and my jewelry bench. And I'm really excited to hear from different perspectives for the conversation.
Yeah, we're really interested to hear more about what's happening in Texas, which is a state we don't necessarily hear a lot of. And to Seattle, which is certainly a strength in contemporary jewelry. Welcome, Kirk. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Kirk Lang, and I'm a studio artist. I wear a number of different hats, but I try and spend, as much time as I can, making my own work, and then, being connected and working with. There's a metals guild out here that I'll talk more about in a little bit, but split my time between that, teach workshops and that sort of thing. But I'm originally from the Midwest, and Cleveland, Ohio specifically, and I moved here about 12 years ago, and pretty excited to be here. It's a really vibrant scene, so happy to be part of this conversation as well.
Great to have you on board, Kirk. And we just go a little way up to Salt Spring Island, off Vancouver Island. Welcome, Jan. How's the air quality where you are at the moment with all the fires?
Hi, Kevin, and everyone. Great to be here. It is hazy here. It's pretty smoky. I'm Jan Smith. I am on Salt Spring Island. I grew up in Vancouver and went to school on the East Coast in Halifax and lived in Washington State in Seattle, which is where I actually got into art jewelry. I had graduated as a printmaker and was very active in the print scene prior to moving to Seattle.
Great to have you.
So
we've got the west coast of Canada covered, as well as the east coast and north. So we've got the east coast of the US and the west coast, and the south as well. So we've got quite a good clock face to get around. Let's go back to Toronto with Melanie. What's your observations about the Canadian contemporary jewellery scene? How do you find it, and where do you think the energies are at the moment?
I find it quite robust in a small and earnest and steadfast kind of way. We are a large landmass with only 35 million people. We're 1/10 the size with respect to a population as the United States. So things happen slightly differently in Canada. Often initiatives are these intrepid groups of individuals banding together in loose collectives to make things happen. Actually, Jan on the West Coast is part of one of these initiatives. It's called Face à Face, which is en français, French, for an exhibition that was organized by an individuals at Harbourfront Centre in our jewelry studio to take a selection of Canadian work, 10 Canadian artists from coast to coast to Paris. It's called Parcours Bijoux, and it's a large international jewelry festival. So that's the kinds of things that tend to happen. Certainly where I'm located in Toronto and in other spots in Canada as well. We have a strong link to Quebec because we have one of the best and world-renowned jewelry galleries, Noël Guillemard Gallery. So we have a strong connection there. Recently, something called Metal Aid Network started up, again, by some intrepid individuals who decided that they wanted to promote art jewelry. We do have a Metal Arts Guild of Canada, but in all honesty, it's not as active and representative as it has been in the past. So I find it quite exciting. I mean, we had the SNAG conference here a couple of years ago. The Toronto International Jewelry Festival came out of that. And one of the pluses of Canada is you can form a loose collective. It could be 2 people. You can write a grant at the provincial level or at the federal level, and they will support your initiative. So there's a lot of that kind of maverick sensibility I find in Canada.
Right, and it does sound like there's quite a few good initiatives emerging. We'll certainly keep our eyes on Metal Aid and what it's doing. Thanks very much for that, Melanie. And down to Maine with Sarah. How would you characterize what's happening on the East Coast? I know it's very dense. There's a lot of activity happening, but what stands out for you?
Yeah, one of the biggest reasons I decided to move to Philadelphia was its proximity to New York and DC. There's a lot going on. There is a lot of schools in the area as well, so there's a lot of students and activity and emerging artists coming through. We have Sienna Gallery in Lenox, and in New York City, Reinstein Ross, which is more commercial goldsmiths. They opened up a gallery annex to one of their locations where Bella Neiman is curating contemporary jewelry shows and artists in that workspace. And then you have things like Philadelphia is just filled with contemporary art jewelers. You have the University of the Arts here, and you have Tyler School of Arts. I myself am actually joining a collective called the JV Collective, which is Mallory Weston's in there, Melanie Bylanker, Maria Ifey, Emily Cobb, and Leslie Boyd. In Ohio, which is still my side of the country. Again, same thing with Canada. The US is so expansive that there's so many different pockets, but I'm gonna bring Ohio into me. Ombre, which is a new gallery, opened this past year, which that's exciting. to see a contemporary jewelry focused gallery. So there's a lot. We also have the Philadelphia Museum of Art's craft show, the Smithsonian craft show. The American Craft Council has a show that happens in Baltimore that's pretty big. And while those shows all represent all different types of mediums, the United States doesn't have a specific show that is just contemporary jewelry, like Hoya, for example. But those shows definitely represent a lot of contemporary jewelers within them. And the work is great. So a lot going on in this area. It's very condensed.
Do you see any particular part of the East which hasn't necessarily had a strong history in contemporary jewelry, but is emerging, where there's a new collective or things happening that we may overlook?
Well, the Hudson Valley area, I mean, you have SUNY Newpults in that area, kind of like New York State. And I feel like artists are staying in that area, or, you know, New York City is getting too expensive. So people are finding these other areas to move to, and that is kind of creating new communities. Baltimore Jewelry Center in Baltimore is emerging as a really great organization. In the couple years that they've been going, they've started an artist residency this past year. They have exhibitions going on continuously. They're creating a lot of community in Baltimore for contemporary jewelry.
Sounds good. We must keep an eye on them. Thanks, Sarah. Let's go down south to Laritza. Tell us what's happening in Texas and that part of the world.
Hello. Well, again, like some of our other ambassadors have brought up, we're covering some really large areas, and in the South in particular, I feel like we're covering an area about this big. That's from San Diego, also including a lot of what's happening in New Mexico. Texas happens to be about a third of the South, so we have quite a bit going on. And then you go into University of Georgia and also in Savannah. So I think that the area is really wide, both geographically, but also in the types of cultural issues that are of interest within each area, because they tend to be very localized depending on where, you know, even what part of the border you're at, whether you're in San Diego or in South Texas. I think those things are very different. You mentioned that we don't hear a lot from Texas, and I think that's really true. Sometimes we really tend to go to either east or west for a lot of our contemporary jewelry scene, but I think that's something that is happening in Texas, is that we have a really great support in university jewelry programs. So you have quite a few universities that are providing jewelry programs that are also very keen on integrating digital technologies into their work. So I'm in Texas State, and there's a class now called Digitally Handmade. We have universities in the Rio Grande Valley, El Paso, University of North Texas, Texas Tech. And then you have all of these great community centers like Houston Center for Contemporary Craft and Creative Site Jewelry Academy, which is here in Austin, Texas, that are also providing the environment for people to learn about jewelry and to also have a community sense about where, about making and kind of fostering this contemporary jewelry scene. Dallas also has a really great number of artists that are now working there. Kat Cole and Kathleen Javier is there, Suarez Tamar. And I think it's new in a sense of Texas becoming a state that has a lot of representation in the jewelry scene. As far as other areas such as San Diego and Georgia, again, we have great jewelry programs. And I think that also provides a space for young, or maybe not young, but a little bit more established faculty members that are bringing their experience and their practices and their own individual interests into these programs that are dotting the South. So I think because of that, it's really establishing a really strong community, both with the new voices that are coming into the field and also a place for maybe the more established voices to have these kind of wear these dual hats of being in an academic environment and also participating in the jewelry field. So I think that as we, that we'll continue to hear more and more about the South because of that kind of strong support that we are seeing as far as in the educational environment.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot happening. Laritza, would you say that there is a Latino voice also within the contemporary jewelry scene in the South, or is it more individuals?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think that people are really starting to grapple with their place in geographically and also in political stance. A lot of the people that we're seeing that are guiding some of these programs and guiding some of these voices are imports. So there are people that maybe are not coming from South Texas. But then you have such a robust body of students that if you're going to school in El Paso and you grew up in Juarez, of course you're going to have a very specific voice. Same goes for the students that are in the Rio Grande Valley. So I think that these kinds of programs are facilitating that Latino voice to come out and be expressed in ways that we maybe would have not been the case had we not had these kind of programs in place already. My first introduction into the jewelry world was definitely a formal one, my first jewelry class. And I think that coming from a country like Mexico, it's seen as such a traditional craft. So I think it was such a gift to be able to have formal training as well as kind of this hands-on tradition that we already come with. So I think that voice is definitely there.
Well, Laritza, we must keep an eye on what's happening and to see what sort of form these voices take, because it sounds very promising. Thanks very much. And move over to Kirk in Seattle. So where would you say the energies are in your part of the world?
Well, I was just thinking in contrast to what Sarah and Laritza had to say, one thing that we no longer have in Seattle, which is unfortunate, is a university program. The UW Jewelry and Metals program closed down, I believe, in 2008. And I actually happened to be the second to last class that graduated. So that is one thing that I feel like this area is lacking. There are programs in Central Washington, and there's a number of schools and workshop venues, such as like Pratt Fine Arts, a local place called Danica Design, a place in Tacoma, and there's a few more. But so I think what has kind of happened, because of the university program closing, is that our community, at least this is the way I feel, but I feel like our community has gotten more has banded together, and we have a really vibrant, strong community connected with the Seattle Metals Guild, which has around, I think, just under 200 active members. And it reaches a much larger audience, I think, in terms of the mailing list. I think it's around 400. And so there's lectures, exhibitions, grants, a lot of opportunities associated with our guild. And we also put on this event called the Symposium every year in October. And it's kind of our big event. And it's actually been growing, but we pull speakers in nationally and also internationally sometimes. And so it used to be just a single day, and now it's growing to be oftentimes like a whole weekend, which is pretty exciting. And we've also started working with local museums such as the Bellevue Arts Museum or Tacoma Art Museum, both of which actively show work centered on craft and art jewelry. So that's a really nice connection that we have here. And we also have Faceri Art Gallery, which shows artists, again, that are national and international jewelry artists. And they also have these kind of short, semi-informal lectures on openings, which is another really great opportunity if you want to hear and join in the discussion on what's happening. And then it's harder for me to say, I guess, commenting on further south, but I know Portland with the Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, there's a pretty vibrant community there. And then, further south into San Francisco and Southern California, there's multiple museums and galleries and organizations as well, such as AJF. So yeah.
And I know this is a dangerous question, Kirk, but would you hazard an estimate of what you think is one of the characteristics of jewelry that is made in Seattle and your region? Is there a particular kind of style? We hear of Seattle in terms of music, but in contemporary jewelry, is there, just feel free to overgeneralize.
Okay, I'll do my best. So this is actually a really good question, because I've been having a couple like sidebar conversations recently with some friends, other art jewelers, and we were trying to kind of wrap our head around that. And I think in the past, maybe there are some characteristics that would be, applied to what the work that was being created here, and words that kind of came up were like, definitely like found objects were part of that. There's kind of like a rawness to the design and the use of materials in the work. I hesitate using the word like looseness, but there's a kind of a playfulness, I think, that is there. But I think as of late, that's changed a bit, because I think it's become maybe more of like a international style, or something that's just more like further reaching. And I don't know if it's because Seattle's growing so rapidly and people are moving from all over, that it's kind of taking whatever style that was here and then having it be influenced by other people from other areas. So that could be part of it. But I think it'd be much harder pressed to kind of determine or identify what it is that makes the Pacific Northwest style what it is right now. I think it's, again, maybe blended a little bit more into the global scene.
Yes, certainly that would be the case with most places. But let's stay with rawness. That's kind of a nice quality, at least to think about when considering the Northwest, and a little bit further up the north of the West to Jan in Salt Spring Island. Tell us about the scene in British Columbia and the west coast of Canada, and how you see it.
I think Vancouver has a pretty emerging scene. Like Seattle, we have no university jewelry program. We have a 2-year diploma program at Vancouver Community College. Langara College offers some evening classes. There's a couple privately run studios, Working Silver and Juvelista, that offer really more beginning classes. Langara Community College is part of the evening. It's an evening program. There is also another college, LaSalle, which tends to focus more on international students. And Vancouver Community College is going through a bit of transition. The head of their department, Jarushka Bevel, unfortunately passed away last year. And Karen Jones, who had been acting department head, I understand will be assuming that role. So I think that's kind of, as unfortunate as it is, I think it's also an exciting time for the school. It's, it's got new instructors. That program was originally set up in the 80s, and it dovetailed in a very European manner into an apprenticeship program. But as the scene in Vancouver has evolved, those apprenticeships have somewhat disappeared. I think it was sort of based on the English apprenticeship program. So a little bit more trade, and I see that school evolving. It's exciting stuff coming out of it. One of the big things that I'm involved in is when I returned back from Seattle, I really missed the Seattle Metals Guild, which was an amazing resource for me. And after the 2011 SNAG conference, I co-founded the Vancouver Metal Arts Association. So we didn't have a scene, so we decided to make it happen. Louise Perrone, who graduated from Alberta College of Art, a number of VCC graduates. Louise is our current president. Lexi Owen, who graduated from Selkirk and has a BFA from Emily Carr, not in jewelry, but in more fine art. Her diploma is in jewelry. She has done some amazing stuff. So we've had a pretty active exhibition program. Lexi applied as an individual and got one of the 2016 Emerging Curator grants and hosted and organized a brilliant exhibition at the Craft Council of British Columbia Gallery in 2016. It encompassed Canadian and North American, United States artists. It involved a catalog and artist panel. It was awesome. We're building on that and doing a juried show for this year, which we had a national call for. What else are we up to? We're also very fortunate. We have one of the members of our guild, Barbara Cohen, is an independent curator, and as we have no galleries in Vancouver that are solely dedicated to jewelry, Barbara has taken it upon herself to curate different shows, national and somewhat US-based jewelries. I think she's done 5. There's one currently showing at the Craft Council of British Columbia Gallery. It's called Seeing Red. Thank you, Kevin, for the little shout out on the AJF about that. And we've networked in with Metal Aid quite a bit as well, trying to feed them anything that's happening. We try and snag anyone who's coming into Vancouver and get them to do a little lecture or participate in some way. We were fortunate to have Bridget from Craft House, Brigitte from Craft House in town, Brigitte Martin, and so she did a Q&A with our president, Louise, which was quite well attended. So, and we've been partnering with the Craft Council of British Columbia on events, earring shows, different, as much as we can sort of drum up to get a scene happening in Vancouver.
Great. Well, it sounds like the Pacific Northwest is quite a distinct region and quite interconnected. And it's terrific to see how, even though there may be not as much support in the education sector, but there's a lot happening in terms of guilds and organisations and so on. Well, just in terms of the brief time we've got left, there are many issues that we could raise, but I think from the outside, looking into North America these days, many people think about craftivism as being one of the active energies in the sector where people are involved in causes that can be expressed through craft that brings people together. And so one of the issues is about the position of jewelry in this context, whether it's something which is recruited to causes in terms of the way in which people wear brooches and bins and so on that may identify certain issues, or whether its really its place is to provide a refuge from politics, something which is about makes us human. I'm just wondering, Melanie, from your perspective as somebody who overviews the different crafts at Harbourfront, how do you see the way craftivism pans out across the crafts and the relationship of jewelry to that?
I think it's sort of when we had spoke the other day, I find it less so, certainly in art jewelry. I think art jewelry still has that place of an elite kind of practice, not elitist, but an elite kind of practice. Even, I mean, there's the precious metals, but even apart from that, when you're dealing with other kinds of materials, you're still dealing with a very select kind of view of jewelry as an art practice. And as I was saying before, because I work with ceramic people, I work with glass, I work with textiles. I think it actually is textiles that's the strongest because of its accessibility. And maybe second to that would be ceramics as accessible to the general public, right? And I do know that's been a cry throughout many decades with respect to jewelry. Oh, the public doesn't understand what we're doing. And I think some of the public understands what you're doing, but I don't think it has a broad appeal like other craft genres and practices have. So, like I was at a conversation this afternoon with somebody with respect to the suffragette movement at the turn of the last century in England. The washerwoman made herself a banner out of cheap fabric and cheap ribbon. The suffragette movement was pretty much spearheaded by upper class and middle class women, and they had very special pieces of jewelry made, with amethyst and with green stones and white, which were the three colors of the suffragette movement. So I still think that exists in some way. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I'm not judging it, but I think it is a reality.
Would anyone else like to come in on this? Sarah, do you have any thoughts from your side? You're in the kind of fulcrum, I guess, around sort of New York and Washington and so on. Do you think that jewelry is best, and do you feel that people are drawn to jewelry as in a sense an alternative to what is a very polarized and bitter political scene sometimes?
I was talking to one of my peers about this the other day because you had mentioned it before, and I couldn't come up with any strong examples of it for me personally. But there was something my colleague brought up that I found really interesting, was kind of the contemporary jewelry scene in America right now has a lot of really powerful women emerging. Like a lot of positions that have been hired, like tenure track positions lately, have been women. Lynn Batchelter with the AJF award. And she brought up the point that it was kind of interesting with the current administration's politics are kind of attacking women's rights. And that was kind of where our conversation went within that. But the other thing I would comment on it is not necessarily art jewelry, but lapel pins are so prominent right now. And it's anybody can design one and get it made in China, etc. But it's kind of interesting to be seeing people who don't make contemporary jewelry or don't make jewelry at all, but embracing adornment as a way for them to show their political viewpoints.
Right, I see. So it's something which people are learning to find a voice through ornament like that. That's interesting. I'm just wondering down south Laritza, where you have the border and so on, whether you see contemporary jewelry reflecting some of the issues around there.
I see this issue under a slightly different light. I don't necessarily see a lot of the current work that's coming out reflecting that political viewpoint yet, but what I am seeing is the makers creating projects that are supporting community activism through education and engagement of communities that I think are the target of some of these stressful political times. So one of the projects that comes to mind that I was really impressed by was the Bridge Project, which is out of San Diego. And I first learned about the Bridge Project at the Yuma Art Symposium. And it was from Rachel Shimpak and Rizal Javier. And they were doing tintypes on the sidewalks. And you can do you can take your photograph and turn it into a brooch. So it was exposing the community to a lot of kind of very old project types of metal techniques and the photography techniques. So really trying to engage the public outside of a traditional art making environment. And they're also working with organizations that are serving both the Latino community, kids that have been incarcerated or displaced. So I think that kind of accessibility to doing something else with your jewelry skills and involving the public and the wider public, I find really interesting. And I think that those are really kind of the examples that I look to when I think about continuing that conversation or creating a space for that conversation to happen For me, like I mentioned earlier, I've always had kind of this dual dance between working in the community, working in academia, and working at my bench. But I think that community work is really what becomes more important, because that's where you really are kind of planting the seeds of what type of work you can make and the voices that you're going to give the voices that are gaining those skills. The Bridge Project, I think it's about 20 different artists that are working together, and they all specialize in different techniques, and they all cater to different types of communities. So I think, again, you're seeing makers that are taking that formal training or that contemporary jewelry training and kind of putting it out in a different context that I find really interesting.
Well, that's given us a glimpse of some of the new forces emerging in the South in terms of contemporary jewelry. Very exciting. Thanks, Laritza. And I guess, Kirk, when it comes to Seattle, people think of it as being a bit of a place of refuge, you know, a place of organic food and fairly wholesome kind of place, far from some of the more, you know, politicized areas of the States. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and you know, I've really thought about that question you just recently asked, and then maybe it is related to the fact we're, you know, tucked in the corner, upper left corner. We're next to Canada. We're it's a very liberal city in Seattle, so it's very easy to find like-minded people. And I would say that I don't see anything like obvious in the work that's being created. I can't think of any like one individual artist that's a jeweler specifically that is you know, commenting on any social issues that are related to kind of the U.S. specifically. But I will say that there's definitely a lot of conversation between us, you know, not our work per se, but, you know, just talking. So there is a possibility that I feel like it could maybe be finding its way indirectly into the work. I know that I'm often listening to like, you know, the news and stuff when I'm working, so maybe it's finding its way into what I do to some degree. But a lot of us, I think, also myself included, do try and maybe keep that out of the work to some degree, because there's like a peacefulness, you know, to doing what you do if you're not trying to, you know, comment on like larger social issues like that. So, and I will say also, kind of from what Sarah said, I have noticed there are a lot of women who are, some are starting businesses based on their skill set. I am seeing a lot of like strong women, I would say, even in the Seattle community, in the art jewelry scene. So there's, yeah, maybe that would be the only social related thing I can come up with, I guess, at this moment.
Yeah, well, that gender does certainly seem to be, you know, a key theme in this, but otherwise it seems almost Buddhist in the way in which jewelry provides, you know, a way of focusing the mind beyond the binaries that afflict people. And finally, if we can just end with you, Jan, I mean, you're in a very multicultural country. It's become one of the most multicultural countries in the world, Canada, both in terms of its indigenous population, but also in terms of the many migrant populations that Canada is accepting. Do you see much of that in the contemporary jewelry scene? Is this
in the Vancouver scene, I don't see that really. I do see some individual artists having some comments on issues that are affecting us. Bridget Catchpole's work is very much about environmental issues and plastic waste. She's focused on that for a number of years. Her work is speaking very loudly about that. Some of Lexi Owen's earlier work, although textile-based, spoke, you know, she did a project called the Textile Institute as in her undergrad. Louise Perron's work individually speaks, but I don't see it as a collective. I somewhat agree with Melanie that it is a little more of a force in the textile front in the Vancouver scene. It has some more political commentaries.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Obviously, things are not going, the political scene doesn't show signs of becoming calmer in the future. So, but maybe the role of jewelry as a way out of that will become even more important. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Melanie. Good luck with your holiday in Nova Scotia. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time this late summer it is for you. Sarah, enjoy the rest of your gallery sitting in Maine. Thank you so much for bringing your view of the East Coast. Thanks very much, gracias, Laritza, for giving us a fresh view of Texas and the South. It's very exciting to see the different way of approaching it. And thanks very much, Kirk from Seattle, and giving us a sense of the rawness which is in your part of the Pacific Northwest, but also a very fine attention to detail, I must say. And also Jan too, hope the fires clear up and the air is better for you in Salt Spring Island, near Vancouver Island in the west coast of Canada. So that's a wrap. Thanks very much, everyone, and look forward to hearing more from your part of that great continent of North America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.